Ali has moved a lot of his stuff over to ClickUp. Tiago Forte has also moved a lot of his business work and project management over to ClickUp. And yet, Notion is still popular. It's still the biggest app out there for most things when it comes to content creation, students, task management, project management, all those sorts of things. Together, Notion is still at the top. Looking back, I think that's because of things like the Facebook group, Notion Made Simple, from Keep Productive, the Reddit that's still going, the Notion Reddit, then you've got the YouTube channels, and when you look up productivity apps, Notion is still, everywhere. You can't avoid it. But just because it's the most popular app doesn't necessarily mean it is actually the best app. I don't think many people would argue Notion is better than Google Calendar because Google Calendar has links, scheduling, recurring events, and recurring tasks. As a project manager, Notion works for individual and smaller teams, but for larger teams, it just doesn't seem to be there. People going to things like ClickUp and Asana and Monday.com. As a note-taking tool or a writing tool, when you look at the majority of writers, they still use things like Word, Google Docs, Scrivener, and tools like Obsidian. Not necessarily as sophisticated, but just Markdown or basic text. And then for tasks, you've got tools like TickTick, Todoist, and even Morgan are just better than Notion. Most people using a task manager over Notion, unless they have everything encompassed inside of Notion, or they're a Notion Pro expert ambassador, insert word there, and they are comfortable using all of the features of the tool. So despite the ever-growing popularity of Notion, there are other tools out there that are better in most specific cases. Even people like Marie Paulin that has their business built in Notion and they consult on Notion, they've grown through Notion's development, still I don't think would argue that Notion is the best app in class at any of those things, but it's good enough at all of them, kind of like a jack of all trades. And then you've got people like August Bradley that are very similar. They've built their business surrounding Notion, but he's not a Notion expert. He's an expert in systems thinking that's using Notion, and that's, I think, the difference between these experts and these people that are gaining a lot of money and a lot of respect and expertise in whatever field they're in. It's not the tool, it's not Notion doing it, it's their skill and expertise in either business or in life management or whatever it is. Just Notion is the tool they're using to do it. And I would argue that most of them don't actually use Notion solely. So I know August used to use a calendar app, i.e. Google Calendar, and I assume he still does in some way. So it's not Notion everything, it's Notion in sort of most cases. And when you actually look at some of the toolkits they have, they've got loads of other apps behind the scenes, and Notion is just the one spoken about most often. But that does mean the tool can be quite simply replaced if it's only doing simple things like managing text, because that can be any text editor or just a piece of paper. Alongside Ali, who pushed Notion to a lot of student users, you've got Thomas Frank that I think pushed Notion to creators. He was the big driving force. Obviously, he's got his second channel, Thomas Frank Explains, which I think is kind of his first channel now because it's his main focus. But this goes through how to use Notion. Anyone could use it this way. But this sort of dovetails off of his VidCon presentation. And for those unfamiliar, back in 2018, VidCon is it's a conference for content creators, so mainly YouTube creators, now moving into other platforms, I believe. But Thomas Frank did a presentation all about how he uses Notion for scripting, research, automation, and all the B-roll and stuff, how he organizes his channel in Notion. I think without Ali pushing Notion to students and without Thomas Frank pushing it to content creators, Notion would be, with all the other sort of note-taking style tools, down tussling for position. Those creators started pushing the ball down the hill and the momentum was just growing because other creators followed Thomas Frank or followed Ali, and then you've got multiple micro creators or micro influencers, whatever you want to call them, started to do their own thing. So it didn't matter what skill you wanted to learn if you were in the productivity space or small business space or content creator space, any skill you wanted to learn, Notion was just there. You couldn't avoid it, and it still is, and that's great for the community, great for the app, great for development, etc., but it doesn't mean the app is the best tool, it just means it's the one most people are using. When you look at the Notion community, it is massive. As you scroll down, you've got loads of global groups, interest-based groups, and then they're all over the world. It's massive now. And when you look at where it started, it mainly came from a couple of YouTube creators that got other creators involved, and then it started growing, and then courses growing, and then experts growing, and now we're even at the point where we have Notion consultants. But Notion started as a free application for everyone, and it is still free for everyone, but there was a limit to begin with. There was a 1,000 block limit. I remember that being very frustrating for anyone that wasn't a student or didn't have access to all of the blocks. But once they got rid of that, it was kind of like the floodgates opened and everyone jumps in. And as the community grew, Everyone wanted to help everyone. You just asked a question and you get loads of people answering. But as the community grew larger, you got more businesses in there, more people trying to earn money and leverage their skills inside of Notion. But Notion, again, started out as a free app, and now we've got the template gallery, and basically anyone can make a template on habits or life or student or business, or you can think of anything and there'll be a template for it now, and sometimes you have to pay for it, sometimes you don't. But either way, if you don't have a base understanding of the tool, the template it can get confusing for new users, which is why you have consultants and help and videos and everything that's going on with Notion. But that is where I think the difference between Notion and other tools at the moment are at. Notion, even though it's complex and can be very, very complicated when you look at the databases, relations, rollups, formulas, self-referencing filters, obviously you've got the buttons now as well, filters and sorts inside of databases, etc., etc. It can be very complicated to start with, but there is loads of help, like loads of help, because loads of people use the tool for the basic things and the complex things. Whereas most other tools similar to Notion as a text editor, workspace, wiki, document sharing thing, whether that's Obsidian or Roam or any other note-taking tool that's popular, Ample Note, there's loads of them. They don't have the same community. They don't have the same help community, and it's hard to get started. It's the onboarding process that's hard to get started. Notion, it's pretty simple, pretty easy to get started and going. And of course, with Notion being everywhere, you see lots of examples of how people are using it, so you don't have to come up with it in your own mind. If you're watching someone learn something through Notion, you can just adopt what they're doing, so you're not necessarily looking for a Notion tutorial, but you're getting it through the video that you're watching. And there aren't many other tools like that you just see people using as they're developing something. But for me, the popularity doesn't justify the use of the Notion tool, because when I look at its features, it doesn't give me anything that other apps can't give me. So for example, in a calendar, Google Calendar is better than Notion. And then for task management, a task management app is also better than Notion. And when I look at Morgan does the calendar and does the tasks, both better than Notion. So it just makes sense to use an app that's specific for those tools, unless I need my tasks linked to my projects, in which case, well, now I need a project management app. But what do I actually need in my projects? Well, the tasks, which are in Morgan, and then I need notes. But where do I keep my notes? Well, I can keep my notes anywhere that I can link to either Morgan, to my events, or anywhere I can quickly find something, which is any text editor, which for me happens to be Obsidian. So for me, I see Notion as a great wiki tool for information that you want to keep stored. Maybe you'd class that as a note taker. I personally don't see Notion as a great note taker because the writing experience is a little bit off, because I prefer text editors, and then referencing and sources, it's just easier with something like Obsidian from my own experience, connecting it with things like Zotero or EndNote or any other reference manager. It's just easier for me. And the 3 years while I was using Notion, yes, I was getting stuff done, but I was doing lots of beneficial things, but not the important things. I was productively procrastinating almost all the time, working out a database or a dashboard or experimenting with a new feature or testing out a new template. I didn't do as much research, anywhere near as much research, as I am now with the tools that I'm using. But that's my opinion from my experience, and it works great for some people, not so for other people. And the way that I would see Notion is it's a good tool, it's good enough, but if you're looking for something specific at whatever task it is you're looking to do, look for an app that actually does it rather than trying to be an all-in-one solution, which I know Notion have got rid of that marketing, but yeah.